Hello. I want to talk about something that I think is important. Um, it's about my life and my journey, uh, uh, just with religion, with my faith, and with my beliefs and how they've changed. And I was thinking about this because I was on a chat of a bunch of people talking about what's going on right now, and it seems like there's just a lot of kids who are just laughing and having a good time. And I used to be like that too. Um, when I was a kid, actually, I went through a really racist phase. And I would play a lot of World War II video games. So I was really exposed to a lot of like neo-Nazi stuff online, and I started to really believe in the things that they were saying, and I held a lot of resentment and anger towards people in my life because I was on psychiatric medication when I was a kid, and so that really uh, made my problems that I suffered when I was a kid a lot worse, and I just wasn't very compassionate at that time because of the sicknesses that I was suffering from. And so it was hard to understand the conflict that I would get into with people in my life, and that formed beliefs against people and against people groups, even though at school I would interact with people and things like that. Um, on the computer, I would really get into, a lot of racist stuff. And I'm glad that I went through that because it exposed me to things that are out there, and it caused me to ask questions about the meaning of life and history, and eventually it caused me to understand who I am as a person, because it left me with uneasy feelings about who I was, because I didn't conform to the ideal that I was being presented online and on the internet. And so this was important in my journey. And eventually I decided to learn German because that was something that was an interest of mine growing up. And I was interested in many different languages, and I've studied different languages, but that language in particular was uh, interesting to me because that answered um, many questions. And so I started studying German. I started studying the history of Germany and of German speaking lands more seriously. And that really opened my eyes to a lot of um, things that have occurred in history that I didn't really know right away. Because a lot of the arguments against uh, um, just this racist, you know, angry rhetoric, it seems sort of contrived. It seems like just what people say to be better, or um, and but then when I started studying German, I actually started learning more about the history, and learning more about the nuances. And I also studied horticulture, and horticulture probably was even a better tool to remove my ignorance, because I started thinking about life differently, because plants are so different from each other. And yeah, we think of them as being so similar. So that really started to change my perspective on things. And I'm not a perfect person. I still, I have not in the sense of that I don't make mistakes. I make errors. I willfully, uh, I have make offenses and things like that. But part of my belief system is that I do believe that we can seek perfection in another sense, which is the older sense of the word, which is similar to a feeling of completeness and of satisfaction or of feeling whole. And so there's a lot of words in these ancient languages that sort of talk about that. And I think that's what Jesus talked about in, at least that's what the record of his lectures and things like that, the record that we have are what people wrote down. And so um, I was very inspired by that when I was a kid, because I just would think that it was just a really important message, because the priests were saying it, and they were nice. We had a priest who was friends with our family, who was nice, and also and I grew up Catholic, so these were Catholic priests, and the churches, would just be smell like flowers, and they had marble floors, and you just hear these stories about this person that was so amazing, and you want to be like that. You're interested in that. You're trying to figure out what the truth of it is. And that to me has always inspired me, even though early on I did doubt God. And I always wondered, I didn't feel like I could believe in God, or I doubted it. And for a long time, I would probably classify myself as an atheist or agnostic. And later on, I was just interested mostly in Buddhism and all these other religions. And so that to me was the process that I went through, and I got in trouble and I got sent away. And during that time, it was a lot of trauma that I suffered that made me change the way I lived. And at that time, I thought it was unjust and things like that. And what got me through was starting to listen to what the staff members would tell me. And so they'd tell me, read the Bible. And so I'd read the Bible. And I found that very interesting and enlightening. And I recommend people to read the Bible for themselves and see what these books say, instead of having people tell them, because I think they'll be surprised by what they say. And then so that got me into reading the Bible, and eventually, and I had grown up being interested in Hebrew. So I was, and then I started learning more about Hebrew, and then I started learning about Arabic and the Quran. And so to me, all those things are connected now. And it's a really interesting mystery that I keep trying to understand. But I definitely feel the presence of some force or something that is aligning things, because there's definitely something that I can't explain that is that can cause things to happen when they happen. And so that the memory of those events is sort of what keeps me keeps my faith, even though sometimes I feel distant from that. I like to think about what the words mean, and try to search the true meaning of those words in these books. And that helps me try to understand what the people thought when they wrote down this information. And I think it's the information that's important, and what effect it has on our lives. Part of that message is forgiveness. Self-forgiveness is an important message. and forgiveness to other people too. And part of that process is repenting, which I personally don't really like that word. I think it's used a lot and by pretty judgmental people. But I think that it is important to understand because no one wants to suffer from the actions of somebody who is constantly seeking forgiveness. So likewise, it's like the golden rule, which is, do unto others as you wish to be done to yourself. And as we grow up, we all begin to experience that a little bit more. And so I think also something I've learned recently and started to learn it unknowingly during the time that I was away at this therapeutic boarding school was about mercy and how to manage conflict. And so a lot of times, I'd have to deal with that. So peace, I gotta go.